Hi. So I don't have any kind of lapel mic or even just a handheld mic that I can use right now. So hopefully the audio quality is not atrocious and my voice is discernible. So first of all, I just want to establish the justification for this video, the reason why it exists, my motivation for making it. I'm a nerd. For those of you that don't know, I am in the process of writing a story. For that story and its history, I have been working to create a couple different languages that are completely of my own make. A few days ago, I was talking to a friend of mine, and as a joke, she suggested that I translate one of the title crawls from one of the Star Wars movies into one of my languages. And I thought that was hilarious, but I decided to do it anyway. And the reason for that is of course, being the very kind and considerate friend that she is, she asked me to translate the title crawl into probably the least efficient language that I created, the one with probably the most words in a sentence and long words that all have tags on them that makes them even longer. So that was nice. So because you're all so interested, right? I have decided to kind of just go through the mechanics of that language and explain it piece by piece using the title crawl, because I wrote a lot and I feel like I need to use it, I guess. So hopefully I can explain it clearly and succinctly and in a way that is entertaining. Okay, so this is the title crawl for Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. This is the title crawl in Sylvan. Owadaki Taknishi Owadaki Taknishi Sel. I don't know how to speak my own language. Owadaki Taknishi Sel Yak. Simple, right? What I did to create Sylvan was I took some of what I considered the most fascinating elements of Japanese, Seneca, and Irish. Basically the three most disparate languages you can possibly think of. And I'll kind of get into the features from each language as I go on. So the first sentence just happens to be kind of perfect for the first explanation. So obviously in English we have, it is a period of civil war. So it's so simple. I was going to try memorizing how to say it to look impressive and say it into the camera without looking down at my notes, but I can't do that. In Sylvan, that sentence translates to Kenyusegi Ogje Ikyagatwisa. Looking at the English sentence, we can pick out three primary features here. There is a verb, there is an adjective, and there is a noun. There are two nouns, okay, but this one period, the noun period, we're not gonna pay attention to that because it's not in the Sylvan translation. So, despite appearances, this is three words. There is a verb, an adjective, and a noun. I guess it makes sense to explain them in the order in which they appear. So we'll start with the noun. Obviously, the most important noun in the English sentence was war or a war. This is that same noun. Ganyasugi. Okay, so I'm not a linguist. I haven't studied for this stuff, but I've put a lot of time into learning about it online and trying to understand it the best I can. So to explain this thing, I'm gonna need to do a little bit of a linguistics lesson. English is very much what we call an analytical language, and that means that words appear as they are always, and new meaning is added with new words or word order. So for instance, if I give you a noun like cow, it's cow. That's it. You've learned the word for cow. That's how English works. People who only speak English at this point might be saying, yeah, it's a cow. What else is there? Some languages have what's known as a system of declension. Essentially, all that means is that nouns change in appearance and pronunciation very slightly depending on their function in the sentence. For instance, are they the object that the verb is acting on? Do they belong to something else in the sentence? Is it something that the speaker or the person the speaker is describing is moving toward? In different languages, different functions can be represented by a change, a mutation, which linguists call declension. Technically speaking, English has only one noun case. Since English doesn't pronounce words differently depending on their function, every noun always appears exactly the same as the nominative case. Nominative comes from the Latin word for name. It's the name of the noun. It's what appears in the dictionary. It's the basic form of the word. Here's the thing. Sylvan doesn't technically have cases either, or rather, it doesn't have declensions. The noun itself doesn't change. However, Sylvan is completely littered with particles. A particle in a sentence, a particle in a sentence is essentially just any word that we can't fit into another category, like noun, adjective, verb, but it still has some important meaning to convey. Sylvan is completely reliant on particles in just about every word in every sentence, which makes it quite long-winded. So the word for war is ganyası, but it has a particle on it. In this sentence, no verb is acting on the noun. The war doesn't belong to anything else in the sentence grammatically. It's not something we're moving toward, it's not something we're moving away from. So the noun would appear in its basic form, its name form, its nominative case. In Sylvan, even the nominative case has a separate tag. That means that by default, every noun ends with this particle. Could I have made it so that the nominative, the basic case, stood on its own and only added a particle for a different case? Absolutely. I didn't though, because basically just because languages in real life are messy, complicated. They don't always follow the most efficient route. They're not always the most logical. So I kind of left that in there because I wanted to. The whole structure, ganyasugi, I pronounced it wrong, ganyasugi is the nominative case of the word for war. We'll get into cases more later. The next word in this sentence is obje, and this is an adjective. Sylvan has 3 types of adjectives. So the first order of adjectives are the conjugating adjectives. What the heck is conjugation? It's declension, but for adjectives and verbs. Conjugation, declension, really the same thing. These first order adjectives in Sylvan change depending on tense and whether it's negative or not. In other words, changing the meaning to not that adjective. So this kind of adjective changes because it's the sort of adjective that someone could have been, but no longer is. So there's past, present, negative past, negative present. I don't know where it is. I'm not a professional. Don't judge me. Second order adjectives are called cell adjectives because they all have the particle cell appended to them. I did mention that Sylvan is completely chock full of particles. It's kind of ridiculous, actually. These kind of adjectives are comparing adjectives. The linguistic term comparative isn't the same as this kind of adjective. A comparative is something like better, redder, more than just good or red. This isn't a comparative necessarily in the sense that cell makes the adjective mean more this. It's more correctly translated as sort of, a red sort of blank, an angry sort of blank. So those are adjectives that can be described as comparing in a way. And there goes the church bells. Try to do our best with the church bells in the background. They'll eventually stop. Third order nouns in Sylvan don't change, they don't conjugate, and they don't have a particle. They just stand on their own. Which is kind of crazy in Sylvan. The only other rule, really, important rule for adjectives in Sylvan is that cell adjectives go before the noun that they describe, and the other adjectives go after the nouns that they describe. Which is why here we have kenyesugi obje. Obje is a word that means attached. One of its secondary meanings is familiar. So this is a familiar war in the sense that it is a war among those who are familiar with each other. We have a war familiar, and then we move on to this. Verbs are possibly the most complicated features of Sylvan because they combine Japanese particles with Seneca syntax, sort of. So the word itself is ikigatwisa. Ikigatwisa. So obviously, it's made up of 3 separate sections. I lied. It's made up of 2 separate sections. This feature was directly imported in terms of operation, how it works, from Seneca, but coded into a particle. Ikie is a counterpart to the other before verb particle, aqua. Those particles determine whether the verb is consequential or inconsequential. Now that's not always cut and dry. It's not always so simple to define what a consequential verb and an inconsequential verb is. Typically speaking, a consequential verb is one that changes the way things are. But also it's not so simple because in Sylvan, these prefixes of a sort change the meaning of the word as well. I need a mint break. So the particle that comes before the verb is always one of these 2, and every verb needs to have them because it defines the meaning of the verb. More specifically, the consequentiality particle works along with whether it is in the agent form or the transitive mood of the verb. Really all that means is, can this verb stand on its own? Or is it something that's connected to something else? So in other words, if I say I'm laughing, or he laughs, or they laughed, all of those are in the agent group because there's no connection. It's just something someone did or is doing. A transitive verb is a verb that someone is doing to something or at something, or it's connected somehow. It's the combination of agent versus transitive and consequential versus inconsequential that defines the meaning of the verb. The only other way to change a verb in Sylvan is to make it a negative. They didn't do this, or they aren't doing this. I lied. So that's this particle. This is one word. Some forms of the verb in Sylvan come with this extra bit. They're not actually particles because they don't exist on their own and they can't be swapped out. They're not tags. They're just part of the change. And one of the final most important rules about Sylvan grammar is the verb always comes at the end of a sentence or a clause. Clause. English's word order is subject, verb, object. It's an SVO language. Or in your case, an SVO language. Most languages around the world are actually SOV languages. Subject, object, verb. So for instance, if you say, I like chocolate in English, word for word in the other languages, it would be, I chocolate like. Sylvan vaguely fits the SOV word order group, but it's not completely set in stone. I took another feature from Japanese, and that is another particle. In fact, now the best example is moving on to the next sentence. The very first word has this particle on it. Fan, or fan. Yeah, fan. There's subtle differences, don't worry about it. Fan is a topic marker. It's not a subject marker, it's a topic marker. And I decided that in this English sentence, the topic is the Galactic Empire, because that's what the sentence all hinges around. There can be arguments that that's not the most logical decision, but it's over and done with, so that's what I'm sticking with. In Sylvan, the word for dominion, kingdom, empire is Enyoda. Enyoda. So fan Enyoda. You can basically translate it as for the noun, as for this. Case markers don't necessarily need to be there when the noun is the topic. When it has the topic marker, that takes the place of the nominative case marker because it's more important, I guess. So the next word is a cell adjective. This is rutzel. Rutzel. That means vile, evil. And then comes the noun oncha. Oncha. So this is our first noun with a different case marker. On means star in Sylvan. Cha is a genitive particle. The genitive case has to do with relation or belonging. English has a sort of genitive case. It's not exactly the same, but if this car belongs to Victoria, in many languages, it would be the car of Victoria. However, in English, it's Victoria's car. This word has changed in spelling and pronunciation. It is limited, however, to belonging. Genitive doesn't necessarily have to mean it belongs to that noun. For instance, oncha, of star, doesn't mean that the star owns anything, because this noun is modifying the first noun. Fan enyoda rotzel oncha, empire, evil of star. This isn't something that in English we would mark with an apostrophe S, Star's Empire. It would be something that we would just put in front of the noun that it's related to, and it becomes a sort of adjective in English. Star Empire. So, fan enjöde rotsel oncha. It's a very long-winded way of saying evil star empire. So the next word is shigishiset. Shigishiset. You've been paying attention, you notice the cell marker, and you know then that this is an adjective. In Sylvan, shigishi means first, earliest. It can also mean only, but the usual meaning is first. Cell adjectives come before the noun, unless they're the topic. So we know that this adjective is modifying the noun kieshot ni. Kieshot ni. So what does this noun mean? Well, we look back at the English sentence. The word first is used to describe the victory. Kieshot ni means victory. This is the marker for the accusative case. That is a noun which is being acted on directly by the verb. The verb hasn't happened yet because verbs go at the end of a clause in Sylvan. This way, because it has a marker, you know that the verb at the end of the sentence is acting on this noun. They won a victory. Therefore, it's in the accusative case in Sylvan. Kieshot ni. The next word is gan, not can, gan. Can you hear the difference? Probably not. That's okay. I barely can, and it's my language. This is a preposition. Gan means against or toward. The next word is dov mashuk. What is this? This is not a case marker. But Caleb, every noun has a case marker, even the nominative, except for the topic noun. This is another exception, okay? Sylvan doesn't have a plural inflection. English puts an S on the end of most words when they're pluralized. One car, two cars. Sylvan doesn't do that, but it does get a marker. This marker usually comes after a number, and therefore it would translate a 4 count, a 10 count. When it's appended to the end of an ordinary noun, it just means a group of unspecified number, so more than one. So thof mashuk means a group of craft or crafts. After that comes the noun siavoncha. It has that genitive marker, which means relation or belonging. This taken as a whole then would be tho mashuk siavoncha, a group of craft of the rebels. The next word is naktagi. Obviously this is in the nominative case. Nothing's happening to it, nothing belongs to it, yada yada. This noun is translated as shelter or home or base. Then we get to our first verb in this sentence, which is okdal sa, which somehow I'm just realizing doesn't have a marker for consequential or inconsequential. I'll add that after. This verb is also kind of acting like an adjective. It says is unknown. Shelter is unknown. It translates hidden base. The next word is interesting. It's another preposition, and it's pronounced qaresh. Qaresh. This is a very good example of the way that vowels change consonants in Sylvan, and this is something that was inspired by Irish. I don't think it's a one-to-one thing, but the idea came from Irish. The language has vowels that it considers broad and vowels that it considers slender. Broad vowels would be like a, o, u. Slender vowels would be like e, Depending on whether the consonant is in the middle of slender vowels or broad vowels, it will change its pronunciation. For some of them, it's very subtle. For instance, the k sound, when surrounded by slender vowels, takes on a very subtle y, kya. With broad vowels, it takes on a very subtle w type of intonation, ko. But this r is a very strong representative for that pronunciation mutation. Between slender vowels, r is pronounced r, and between broad vowels, it's a uvular, r, like in French. The r is surrounded by broad vowels, but the S is connected to a slender vowel, so it's not pronounced S, it's pronounced Sh. Guaresh. Pretty simple, right? Guaresh means outward, so it's defining the verb that's about to come. Ak kon sach. This verb is representing a continuous action, and it means striking, attacking. And the final word of this paragraph and this sentence is a verb again, aquadacha. This is a past tense verb, and this means have won. This is the verb that the noun kieshot ni is connected to, the one that we talked about 5 days ago. So I'm not going to waste time going through the next 2 paragraphs. We've covered most of the important grammar and syntax, as well as pronunciation and spelling. The only thing really left is just to cover the paragraph as a whole, what it means word for word. Right, so the first sentence we covered means war, familiar, and I didn't tell you what the verb meant. It means there is. The second sentence is, as for the empire evil of star, first success against, craft of rebel, shelter is unknown outward or from, striking, have won. That's not confusing at all, is it?